Next, under giving notice of motion, Councillor Hayter. Notice to rescind parts of motion R 00316-2022 from December 5th, 2022 regarding the Columbia Park development. In two parts. First, we'll do first part. Councillor Hayter, go ahead, please.
Thank you, sir. So I'm just going to kind of run through my rationale here, and then I believe we look for a mover and a seconder, if I understand this correctly. So thank you for your attention here, everyone. You know, I often hear that we should try to run our city more like a business, but I've never owned a business. So my decision tonight is based on trying to run our city more like a family. And when it comes to my own family, we always budget to make sure that our needs are taken care of. And whatever's left over afterwards, we put that towards our wants. Now, those of you who know me well, you're aware that I'm a huge Disney World fan. And if I could go there every single year, I would. Do I need to? No. But do I want to? Absolutely. But in years when I don't have as much money, my family shelves those plans and we focus on something smaller. Now, what does that have to do with what I'm talking to you about tonight? Well, a couple of years back, in this very room, we heard a presentation from a group who was interested in bringing a pump track to our city. And I thought it sounded very interesting. And at an estimated cost of about $350,000, I voted in favor of pursuing that project. Now, if we fast forward to the end of 2022, the scope of the project increased and the cost for the first phase had jumped to over $1 million. Now, that included things besides just the pump track, but it led me to question whether we should actually proceed with this or not. During my time on council, we've heard from individuals representing local teams and organizations looking for new facilities for their sports. Soccer would like a facility big enough to host tournaments. Football has the numbers to warrant examining a city-owned field. Basketball coaches have shared their frustration trying to find gyms big enough to run their winter programs. And hockey families want us to ensure adequate ice time. Each of these groups has valid concerns, and I'm counting on the results of our upcoming rec master plan to help give this council, as well as those in the future, a roadmap to guide rec facility and amenity decisions. Does the pump track and Columbia Park project rank high enough on that plan to proceed now? As Ashley mentioned in the first big chunk of his presentation tonight, the cost of feeding our families and heating our homes has gone up a great deal over the past year. We're all trying to find ways to stretch our dollars further than we ever have before, and we're making difficult financial decisions just to get by. And as you also heard, we have some massive projects on the horizon, including York Road, the new hospital, and the wastewater treatment plant. I honestly do appreciate all the work that our admin team, as well as the others involved, have put into the planning of this project, but I believe at this time we owe it to our taxpayers to pause this project for now. So, I think we're looking for somebody here, sir.
I will ask for a motion then, if you are finished with your presentation. I'll ask for a motion that with unanimous vote, council waive notice for this motion to rescind parts of motion R 00316-22. Any questions, council, before anyone makes a motion? And that is moved by Deputy Mayor Golden, and we need a seconder, please. I'm sorry, we need unanimous. Help us, please.
Sorry,
Jess.
Mayor Hipsley.
Yeah.
Councillor Golden, do you had a question
I'm
first?
sorry. I'm
okay.
sorry.
Thanks, Mayor Hipsey. I just have a question, and it may be for Ashley. With rescinding this and with the implication to our budgets, to our capital budgets, because this would come from capital budget, how would this affect, because I see numbers from 2021, 2022, and 2023. So if you could just explain what now happens to the funding that we had put into those budget lines.
Thank you, Councillor Golden. So the funding, it comes from we'll say a myriad of places. There's some funding out of drainage, there's some funding out of new capital, parks, that kind of thing. So I think more work would have to be done to determine that. It's in the budget as it is. If council chooses to withdraw it, then we won't be spending that money. Some money has been spent to date on design, but it's not it's not the whole amount, obviously, and no work's been done on construction. But I think the drainage money would stay in drainage because there was a previously approved drainage project that we kind of sidelined for that. So I think that would revert, and that was about $300,000 if I'm correct. And then the remainder, I think there's further discussions as to what would happen. It could be available for reallocation by council. There could be talks about, do you want to look at some or any of these things in the future? Just save the money to do this project, but at a later date when it's more fiscally responsible? Or do you want to do parts of it, all of it, that kind of thing? So I think there's more conversations to flush out, but it's not going to derail the budget process as it is with council having the ability to reallocate that once we go down that path.
Thank you very much, Councillor, or Deputy Mayor Golden. Councillor Chiz.
Yes, just looking at this project, first of all, I want to say that I'm very much in favor of any kind of recreational facilities that we can do, and this type of thing, even at $1 million, is fairly small in comparison to a new ice plant or a new ice surface and that type of thing. My question is, yeah, if you put this on the back burner, the price went from $300,000 now to over $1 million, so sometimes you put things on the back burner and they totally get forgotten about. What's going to happen a year from now, 2 years from now? How much is this project going to cost then if it's gone up that much in this short time? And sometimes it's maybe better to act now and get the best possible project going rather than waiting and finding out that it's now overpriced and not do it at all. No, I'm not suggesting that we, I like where Councillor Hayter's coming from on this, but I think we have to look at the complete picture. So.
Thank you, Councillor Chiz. Deputy Mayor Golden, your mic.
Thank you. And just one more question. The drainage that we have, we're moving the drainage from the drainage reserve funds over to this project. Is this part of the drainage program that we had, that we started, and will help with the overall drainage of the city?
Thank you,
Where does
Councillor.
that sit in that program we have?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Golden. So this isn't coming from the drainage reserve. It was a project that was included on the 21-22 capital, or the 22-23, and it was kind of the next phase of our major drainage. There was $300,000 earmarked for design of kind of the next phase of it, and that would happen after the York Road construction and associated drainage work was done. Now, realizing that, that might be 5 or 6 years, 7 years down the road, it's possible to reallocate that in the meanwhile. So it wasn't coming from reserve, just so it was new capital dollars for 22, I think it was, off the top of my head. But it was identified in the master drainage study. This was one area where ponds were available. The focus to date has kind of been going on downstream stuff. There were some ponds that were done along Drake up in the past, and then we did the North Outfall project, and you kind of work backwards from there. So included with the York Road project is finishing that outfall, tying it into the Victoria drainage ditch, and then moving it along. And there were a few standalone projects that can be done out of order. They don't necessarily have to be done in order, and this was one of them. And then it kind of made sense to do it if you're doing the work at the pump bike track park thing, then you would want to kind of get some synergies there. You're already there with you're mobilized, the equipment's there, you're moving earth around to build it. You would have to factor in drainage either way, so that's why it made sense to do it at this time. Would it have been the next drainage project? I can't speak to that, but I don't think it was. So.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Golden. Councillor Zaria.
Yeah, I don't want to, keep going on this, but I just want to explain my rationale, which I agree with Councillor Hayter as well, and what other councillors have said here tonight. But obviously, everybody's in favor of amenities, additional amenities to the city, and by themselves, when these projects came up, they seem reasonable. As Ashley just touched on, though, some of the synergies that were created to kind of put these projects kind of together now, a basketball court, a pump track, oh, hey, we might as well include drainage while we're doing it here and add a parking lot. Well, then it went from, something that appeared reasonable to something that at this time doesn't seem feasible to go with. So I'm in favor of the motion on the floor. So Just a little explanation behind it.
Thank you, Councillor Zaharia. Councillor Chiz?
Thanks, Mayor Mitch. Yes, I'm very much in favor with what Councillor Hayter is saying. My only concern is that this thing doesn't get pushed aside and not re-looked at. I think it's a very nice project. It would make that part of the city a great place to visit, and as long as it doesn't get just shoved aside, as long as it's kept in the limelight, so it's something we can look at a year from now or 2 years from now, that's my concern.
Thank you, Councillor Chiz. Deputy Mayor Golden, if you take the chair, please. Just for clarification purposes for our taxpayers, please, Ashley, this project turned into $1.1 million, roughly?
Roughly, yes.
Roughly. So can you break that down by category? Pump track is,
Yeah.
parking lot is,
Yeah, just real quick, so I think the pump track itself was actually only going to be about 425, so I think the estimate was the original 350, and then you add a couple years, and it's not too far off, but then there's, I think, a couple $100,000 that would have, there were some basketball courts planned in another area that, well, you're not just going to add, them there. If you're going to do something here, it makes sense maybe this area could use those as well. And then I don't think the parking lot was looked at as part of the original design, and it is required, and with the extra traffic there need to be a place for people to park. And then the drainage is about $300,000. So that the parking lot and area around it was about $175, $300 for drainage, and I think, let's call it $200 or so for the basketball courts.
gotcha.
Just
Thank
off the
you.
top of my head. So.
Thank you very much. I find that often the miscommunication, there's always pieces left out that really embellish the wrong direction. And yes, this is a lot of money. It started off being $350 or whatever we were told, and to do this properly, because we don't want to go back and do it twice, it turns into that $1.1 million. And I do believe this, that we have to be very prudent and careful with how we spend our money, especially now with inflation and all the increased costs and so on. And I do agree with what's been said, even Councillor Chiz, how long do we wait? When do we pull the trigger, so to speak, and when do we do this? But that brings up the next question. So supposing it doesn't pass and we put this on pause, as it's been suggested, we've allocated X amount of dollars for this, correct? Yeah. Can we take that money and move it over to another project with council's permission or approval or so on? Or do we just keep that in a pocket and say that that's for when we decide to push play?
I think ultimately that would be up to council to make that decision. I'd say if you decide to do something else with it, then you're back to the drawing board for how to fund this project if council chooses in a year, 18 months, 24 months to go ahead with it. So if you're feeling in your gut that you want to eventually do this, I'd recommend earmarking it for this. If the thought is that no, we want to reallocate that, and that's the discussion to have.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, and I'll just make one more comment and then take the chair back. The fact of the matter is that council made this decision just before we decided to go with the master rec plan survey. So now we've got this in gear, and we want to learn what we really do need, because there's so many asks and there's so many different activities, and council totally supports family amenities and sports. So that, let's be very clear with that, everyone, that's where we want to look after our community big time. So having said that, that master rec plan is due to arrive somewhere, I understand, in May and June. So I think that's a big part of why we're even bringing this up tonight and discussing it. I'll take the chair back. Thank you. Councillor Hayter.
I have one last question. Sorry to put you on the spot, Councillor Zaharia, but we went to that public consultation, and the presenters, the designers were there, and they refreshed my memory. Did they say the basketball courts would still need additional stuff down the road, or was that the pump track?
The basketball court, they're talking, sorry, the basketball courts, they're talking about fencing around it and stuff, so all this.
And was there something about the court itself as well?
I don't think the court itself, but the next phase, they discussed about putting a path in there, trees, you won't even find.
Right, okay.
benches, that kind of thing, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayter. Councillor Chiz.
Yeah, I just need some memory refreshing here too. First of all, I believe the amount is about $1.1 million a year that we're getting from a rec levy right now. And when we were talking about before, like the biggest project right now for the rec levy is the Deer Park Clubhouse. We were talking in the past, and I don't know what the total figures are, just using that rec levy, Deer Park Clubhouse is paid for in, let's say, 7 years. But there's ways to maybe take those payments so that maybe it gets spread out over a longer period of time, and this money could be used for other recreational facilities. Is this something that would fit in that category?
Thank you, Councillor Chiz. That's a loaded question. I guess the 1.1 that is the essentially the rec levy, the rec facility levy, I guess as we're calling it, that's been earmarked for a number of years because it also includes the work to the Kinsman Arena and the Gallagher Center for ice plant upgrades. So I think you're right, 7 or 8 years to pay that off. So I think nominally the plan was to borrow that money, and that's kind of a 10-year loan or whatever to pay that off using that 1.1 over 10 years. Gets you kind of there plus interest. But at the end of the day, I think we're about halfway down that project and we're cash flowing it. So we may not borrow per se on it, but until that's kind of paid off, you haven't funded the clubhouse or funded the, we're kind of in a negative funding until that 1.1 catches up with it, essentially. So an internal loan, if you will. So yeah, once that is paid off, then council has at its disposal 1.1 a year. Ideally, we tend to keep them for the same thing. So when the loan was paid off for the Gallagher Center, you decided to use that for rec facilities. And I don't think rec facilities is exclusive to indoor facilities or buildings. It can be outdoor stuff once that's paid off. And you could, in theory, then have 1.1 a year for both maintenance and upgrades to rec facilities.
Sorry, I just, okay. This 1.1 is basically used to pay off a loan for the clubhouse and different things, and it's, let's say it's supposed to be paid off in 7 years. If we added something like this to it and took the loan for 10 years, and this could be included in it, I don't think that would affect taxpayers at all, would it?
So if I am understanding, you're asking if we could add to the loan and just tack this onto those additional projects and pay for it the same thing? I guess that would be possible, yeah. It wouldn't if we had already secured a loan with that and it was being paid off. I don't know that you'd renegotiate that loan or anything, but that hasn't been done, so.
Thank you, Councillor Chiz. Councillor Zaria.
Sir, just one last question, since we're talking about interest and loans. I know I mentioned it before, and not necessarily with the budget here, but with your budget going forward, it asks to include interest payments into the cost of it, just for us for review. So just a reminder for that.
Thank you, Councillor Zaria. So, Jess, we need some guidance here, please. I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't see your hand up.
Thanks, Mayor. See, I kind of got my hand up there late. I'm looking at the recommendation, and I have a concern about replacing some of the language. And it says here, replace with, proceed to complete the design but not proceed to tender at this time. That concerns me because we've already used funds to go to design, and we're going to complete the design. And in this, it doesn't say at any time that we're going to be bringing it back. So I'm not certain. I feel that we've got money spent, and we're just going to table this. And I would be much more interested in seeing something with a date if we're going to be looking at this, saying that we wait until the master plan comes in, because right now I'm not in favor of spending money for designing if we don't have any idea when this might come back. We've got money in the budgets right now, and I totally understand the inflation and what families are facing. We're all facing it, including myself. But this has been worked through our budget. It's been worked through our Recreation Services Committee, and now we're rescinding it, and the work that our staff has put into it with absolutely no date here of when we would even consider it, and I find that difficult.
Thank you, Councillor Golden. Councillor Breers.
Thanks, Mayor. And just on Councillor Golden's point, and this is probably a question for Councillor Golden, but
We're always challenged by the government and other grant agencies to have shovel-ready projects. So if we finish the design, is that considered a shovel-ready project? Should there be recreational funding? Like, is that what shovel-ready?
Shovel-ready usually means, and I'm sure Ashley can help me on this, usually means that it's gone through some type of a design project. It has engineering involvement in it. It's just not something that says we need to do it and this is what it might cost. So this is definitely, now I don't know where we would sit and where the funding packages are right now. I'm understanding that most of those ISIP grants are now fully allocated. We're going to be seeing new ones coming out by 2026. By that time, even if we had this in design and dollars coming forward, those would be outdated. They would want updates on that. So that's my concern.
So thank you for that answer. The second part of this is, I'm not sure where we're at in the motions part of this.
We need help.
Thank you, Councillor Beers. There are no motions currently on the table. So we would ask for waiver of, by unanimous consent, to consider waiver of notice, and then we can consider the.
So that we can have this discussion?
Yes. Great, yes. So.
Okay, I'd like to propose an amendment to Councillor Hayter's motion, but before we do that, I need to make a motion that we waive the requirement for
Notice, yes.
notice.
Yeah.
And must be unanimous if it's going to work. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if I read these red words, move to unanimously waive the requirement for notice for the motion to rescind parts of motion R00316-2022 regarding the Columbia Park development and consider the subject immediately.
And we're looking for a seconder as well. Seconded by Councillor Chiz. I think we've had lots of great discussion. I think we're ready to go here. All in favor of the motion, please, Council. And that is carried with unanimous consent. Thank you. Now we can talk some more.
So now we can talk about it.
Now it might be ideal to move the motion from Councillor Hayter's, from his notice, from his
Yeah,
document.
we're in the second part now.
Yes.
Yes.
So I can read this, and then you can tweak it. Okay. Well, I'm going to move that parts of motion number R00316-2022, as contained in the regular council meeting minutes of Monday, December 5th, 2022, be rescinded as follows. Proceed to tender on Phase 1, which will determine the final construction costs for Phase 1, and report back to council with the bids, and to obtain direction if the tender price exceeds the approved budget of $1,090,000, as well as C, defer the other phases of the Columbia Park development to future budgets. And further, I wish to reintroduce a substitution that council direct administration to B, proceed to the complete design on the project, but not proceed to tender at this time.
All right, I need a seconder for this, seconded by Councillor Zaharia. Let's have some more discussion, Councillor Beers.
Okay, so now I'd like to propose an amendment that, I guess C, it says defer other phases of Columbia Park development to future budgets. We should just defer it all, including the pump track, to 2020, to next year's budget deliberations for consideration. So that, on Councillor Golden's point and Councillor Chiz, it doesn't just fall off the shelf. It just goes to next year's budget for consideration again. I'm not sure how to word that into your motion, Councillor Hayter, but.
Do we mention anything about pending the results of the master rec plan and defer it to next year's budget? Does that match the intent of what you're trying to say?
I never considered the master rec plan, although I'm absolutely willing to. I just want to I agree that we need to bump this down the road, but I want to satisfy the fact that we can't forget about it.
Right.
I want to just simply bump it down the road.
So is this an amendment, or is this Councillor
motion.
Wyatt changing his? Do we have a seconder on Councillor Wyatt? I'm
Hayter.
sorry, Councillor Hayter's.
Yes, we had Councillor
So what is
Zagaria
this now?
second.
'Cause
So I believe Councillor Breers is now trying to move an amendment, and we're just hashing that out, yes.
Yeah, the wording of it, so someone needs to help me with the wording. I don't know where it fits in this motion, but.
Councillor Wyatt?
I don't think we have to worry at all about it dropping off or being forgotten. I think we just proceed, get the dollars, and we'll have a plan in place. And when we're ready to spend the money to do it, we'll spend the money to do it. We got the drainage part put aside already, and we'll go there. And maybe the council, if it's not the council, this council, maybe the next council decide not to do it or do something even bigger and better out there. So, I mean, I'm not worried about putting a timeline on if this will get done. This will be on our capital budget next year for sure. We're not going to forget about it. So I'm not too worried about that at all, putting a date on it.
Deputy Mayor Golden, if you take the chair, please. What's the dollar amount that we spent on the design of this project? Do you know off the top of your head, Ashley?
I apologize, Your Worship, I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Anyone care to guess? That's a bad word to use, but no approximity? No? Okay. I'll take the chair back, just a question. All right. Please.
Sorry, can I just clarify?
Yes.
Councillor Breers was in, working on moving an amendment. Has that fallen to the floor? Are you?
No, I'll still make an amendment that we rescind that motion, as Councillor Hayter is suggesting, and that we reintroduce it at next year's budget deliberations, or reintroduce the project.
So if I can clarify, sorry.
Yeah, no, please. We need-
Perhaps we could add, instead of future budgets, to next year's budget instead of just future budgets?
I'm good with
Is that what you're looking for? Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Beers. Councillor Hayter, are you good with that motion? Because it's really just piggybacking on yours.
Sorry, we just need a seconder
Oh,
for
we need a
that amendment.
We need a seconder for that. I'm sorry. Thank you, Councillor Chiz. Seconded by Councillor Chiz. Okay, any more discussion on that, please, Council? Now would be the time. All right, going to call for a vote. All in favor of that amendment to the motion, please. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Have we done everything we need to do on this, or we got one more?
Now we would just vote on the motion as amended.
Okay. All right, I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Hayter and seconded by Councillor Breers. I think we've had lots of discussion. I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of the motion? And that is carried unanimously as well. Thank you. Great discussion. Thank you, Councillor Hayter.